All right, thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. Good to see some familiar faces in the room. We wanted to talk a little bit about Socrata's perspective, and it's really the perspective of our customers on this global shift we're seeing towards data-driven government, data-driven governance, and really quick introduction to Socrata. We're a software company based in Seattle, and we focus exclusively on helping government organizations, all levels, cities, states, federal agencies, countries, NGOs, take their data, make it available to people, and make it useful to their constituents, citizens, businesses, academia, developers. I think you've heard a lot from my colleagues here about open data. So we've been working with some amazing customers, and my presentation today is really their story, what we have learned along the way by working with these great customers at every level of government. Why are they doing it? Very quickly, then I'll get to what are they actually doing. Diego talked about innovation. That's the most exciting thing about open data. For the first time, governments are leading the way, and businesses are following in a fantastic, innovative domain like open data. So transparency, you've heard a lot about that. That's table stakes at this point. But beyond transparency, people who live in cities want access to quality of life information. When is the next bus coming? Simple question. Is crime going up or down in my neighborhood? Can I get that data? Can I consume it in a way that makes sense to me? That's also open data. It's not just about transparency and holding government accountable. It's about saving a few minutes so I can spend time with my kids instead of spending it waiting for a bus. It's also about changing the experience of citizens. We're being conditioned now to expect a certain type of experience on the web and on mobile devices. Why should a government experience on a government website not live up to that standard? There's no reason for it. Brett Goldstein, the former chief data officer in Chicago, said, he said, I hate this expression, good enough for government work. What does that mean? Right? And open data is an opportunity to change that. It's also about, I think, Maury talked about this, it's about breaking silos, data silos, information silos inside the government organization. About half the data on the Socrata platform is being shared inside these organizations from one department to another, which is fantastic. Gene talked about this, the ecosystem. These are not Socrata's ideas. These were pioneered by people like Tim O'Reilly, who said we need to move from a model where we put our taxes in and get services out to a model where government is a platform, is an accelerator, is an enabler for innovation. And that's exactly what's happening. But it's also about using this newly available data for these government organizations to say, well, look, we can now start looking at this data and analyzing it ourselves to measure our own performance and to get some new insights. Programs like CompStat in New York that started in the 80s, that became CityStat in Baltimore, and StateStat in Maryland, and HUDStat in the federal government. These are all programs designed to improve performance based on analysis of this data and making it available to citizens to drive accountability. So what are they doing? I'll give you 5 stories from 5 of our customers. I could give you 15, but I think we're limited by time. New York City, Carol Post talked about the early days of New York City open data. What's happening now is that they've taken open data to a whole other level. They've started a group called the Mayor's Geek Squad, headed by Mike Flowers, and Rachel Hote in New York are driving this. And they're using their data to solve urban problems. They had a problem with clogged sewers. So restaurants take cooking oil, dump it in the sewers, quite illegally. And, this causes big problems. And it's like, how do you find out who put the cooking oil in the sewers? So before, you used to send inspectors, and, it's a very manual, labor-intensive process, and hopefully you find who did it. While the guys in New York grabbed the data, grabbed public data, open data, location of restaurants, previous inspection data, and data from the 311 system where somebody reported that there's now a clogged sewer, superimposed those 3 data sets, and were able to see 95% of very likely culprits without sending a single inspector out. Saved them time, saved them money, produced better service for citizens in New York. City of Edmonton in Canada. Jean talked about how this has become a global mainstream movement. It really has. They've been an early pioneer in open data, and now they're taking this open data and reporting on performance. So if you live in Edmonton and you want to find out how well is the city doing in terms of filling potholes, you can get that information on the Edmonton website. And when you drill down on it, you can actually see these potholes being filled on a map. And you can see what's going on in your neighborhood. So they've enabled this closed-loop system where they report on performance and engage citizens. City of Chicago, in my view, one of the best open data programs anywhere. Thanks to work of a lot of people in Chicago, including an incredibly vibrant civic developer community. So Chicago is, I think, doing some pretty amazing things. One of them is this concept of real-time data. So one of the things that happens in Chicago is when a car gets towed, they beam that information to the Chicago Open Data Portal or the platform via APIs. These are programmatic interfaces, machine-to-machine interfaces that take the human intervention out of the flow of data. And then that data becomes available on their portal. And now civic developers build apps so that if you leave a place and you're like, where's my car? You can text and get where your car was towed to. Simple stuff. But it's all enabled by data infrastructure that removes friction in the flow of data thanks to these things called APIs. They do the same for snowplows when they have snowstorms in the city. In the federal government, Medicare and CMS, there was a question about, just how effective is it that we now make data available about the cost of care, the efficacy of care? Does it drive the wrong behavior? Does it drive the right behavior? So Medicare and CMS are publishing information about the cost of the 100 most common procedures in 3,300 hospitals around the country. And you can see in this chart, I did this, I think, when I was in Houston, but these are hospitals in Houston for one specific procedure. I think it was a pacemaker implant. You can see widely differing costs between these hospitals in the same city for the same procedure. So the question is why? Why is the cost that different? So could we marry that with data about, perhaps readmission rates for these hospitals, infection rates, who knows? So now the data is available, and what it's doing is it's empowering consumers in markets that were before not transparent. We talk a lot about government transparency. Well, what about transparency in consumer markets like credit cards, mortgages, healthcare products, healthcare services? All of these things are important, and government is playing a role in bringing transparency to those markets, which is pretty amazing. Right here in San Francisco, again, fantastic open data program in the city of San Francisco. They have health inspection data. Probably some of it is on Excella. I don't know. But when that data is now available on Yelp, which is where it's most useful to consumers, this is why open data is evolving to be a consumer-facing experience. And then finally, the World Bank, since we have a global audience here, they are engaged in a digital fight against poverty, and they see data as every bit as important as the money they invest in development projects. So they're using the data to communicate what they're doing, how they're doing it, and to engage local communities. It's like, okay, we put money to put a school here. We want people to know that there's money to build a school in this community, and we want them to engage with this information. Let us know how it's going, find out what's going on in their local community. So they're big on storytelling with data so that they can engage this global audience around development and use data as an asset to fight poverty. Those are 5 stories I wanted to share with you. Thank you for allowing me to share that. Thank you.